Kendall Brown back with the Pacers, answering one of the team's final questions of the offseason. Where do the Pacers roster stand now? Plus, Tyrese Halburton on the cover of Slam and playing in a local Pro-Am with Obi Toppin last night. How cool. We'll talk about it all today on the Locked On Pacers podcast.
You are Locked On Pacers, your daily Indiana Pacers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Wednesday, everybody. Welcome into another edition of the Locked On Pacers podcast, where we, of course, talk about the Indiana Pacers. As always, my name's Tony East. I cover the team for Forbes and SI, and today, roster moves. Pacers made a move. Funny timing on this one. Pacers signed Kendall Brown to a two-way deal. Funny timing because I'd planned about talking about the two-way slot the Pacers had open as the last bit of offseason stuff to cover to kind of round out free agency. Well, never mind. It's not open anymore. Kendall Brown back. What does that mean for the Pacers? Their roster situation, Kendall Brown himself as the team progresses. Plus, Tyrese Haliburton on the cover of Slam. That's really sick. And played in a Pro-Am last night with Obi Toppin and some other NBA players. I was there. It was awesome. Talk about all that today. And Haliburton gave us some nice comments, which you can read and hear at various places. We'll start with the Pacers making a move. Again, funnily enough, I was about to cover this today. Kendall Brown signs a two-way deal. The final one for the Pacers. Oscar Tshiebwe has one. Isaiah Wong has one. They have an open one. Their teams are allowed to have three now in the new CBA. Kendall Brown, who had a qualifying offer out there. He could have signed at any time. Signs a two-way deal with the Pacers. He is back for his second season with the team with that final two-way slot. If you've been listening to Locked On Pacers for a while, if you're an everyday listener, you would have known that I thought this was coming for a while. And it actually dates back to last March, not even last March, 4 months ago in March, when the Pacers cut Trevel and Queen to bring in Gabe York. They could have cut Kendall Brown, who was injured and not playing again, for the remainder of the season. They did not. They kept him. They kept his rights. They kept him in the building. They let him rehab with them. And he did well in that process. Had a good summer league. We'll talk about that later. And at that moment, I thought, they must still like him. Kevin Pritchard said it at his postseason press conference, right? Every step of the way, even since drafting him, the Pacers' actions have said they really like this kid, right? They sent away a 2026 second-round pick and cash to get him in the second round of the 2022 draft. You don't do that unless you really like the player available. They gave him NBA chances, 6 of them, all between Thanksgiving and December 7th, if you'll recall. They were really banged up when they went out on that stretch, but they needed him. They gave him opportunities. They gave him chances in the G League. They liked the kid. He just got hurt. So he only played like 22 total games combined between the G League and NBA last year. Another chance makes a ton of sense for him, and I think that's the right choice for the Pacers for a two-way deal for him. Their actions have said this was coming for a long time, but his play also earned this, right? Kendall Brown earned getting a second chance to come back and play for the Pacers. Again, if you've listened all the time, you know that I've been high on his defense of what he showed defensively in the G League, and guess what? In Summer League, he led the Pacers in total steals and total blocks across the 5 games, both categories, right? He was really good on defense out there too, among many things, but in general, he had a solid first year, right? 10-point, I believe, 3 points, 4.9 rebounds per game in the G League on pretty good efficiency. That's solid. He had a 20-point game in his last outing, right? Was rounding into form, and then had to have surgery on that fractured tibia. So his play was solid last year. I think that really earned him the chance to come back, and why they liked him is he had good stats. He had good defense. He did well, and he had fine NBA play as well. Like that game they won, that Andrew Nembhard game is what it will be remembered as, that game in Golden State where Nembhard was amazing, but Kendall Brown played a bunch that night, had 3 points, 5 rebounds. They win against the defending champs at the time. And that was December 5th of last year. December 7th, he's announced as out for a while, right? So he's had just a December 7th was his last game, and then he was announced as out for a while, right? So he's just had a brutal injury timings last season. That really hindered his development and hurt his growth. But when he did play, he looked good and looked like a guy that is worth investing in and worth sending away a draft pick in cash to give a chance, especially on a two-way. And the athleticism is really the big thing that pops. He's so quick. He can jump out of the gym. And he's only 20. He's still so young. So that's the perfect kind of player to think about with the two-way deal, right? To me, two-ways are about one of these things or the other. One is, this is not the only way to use two-ways, but for project players, either guys who have crazy athletic traits and very little skills that you'd like to develop those skills and see if that player can become something else. Jalen LeCue, the Pacers did not have him on a two-way, but he seems like a perfect two-way candidate to me. Cassius Stanley was on a two-way for the Pacers, for example, or the opposite, where a guy has really high-level skills in one specific area but needs to develop either in their traits or other skills, like Oscar Tshiebwe, for example. There's lots of ways to go about this. Edmund Sumner was another one of the athleticism ones, but he actually developed those skills, right? That's what can happen on the high end of these two-way deals. Kendall Brown is the next chance for them to do this. Pacers have done this before, having a guy on 2 consecutive two-ways. Brian Bowen got 2 a couple of years ago. If you'll recall, he had some nice moments for the Pacers before they cut him for absolutely desperate need for depth. Gabe York has technically had 2 two-ways in a row. We'll talk about him. But yeah, Kendall Brown is back. He did well after returning from injury last year, but then got hurt again, and he kept that off with that strong summer league. And I think that really sealed the deal for this deal to kind of get done, right? If you remember in Vegas, I already talked about him leading in blocks and steals. He averaged 8.6 points and 4 rebounds. That's fine, but he was 47% from the field. The defense was solid, 3 for 7 from deep. It's only 7 attempts, so maybe nothing to take from that. But his stuff with the ball was pretty yucky. His decision-making wasn't amazing, but he had a lot of really high-level moments that made you feel like he's made progress, or at least I felt like he had made progress, and that was on both ends of the court. So to me, the fact that he was solid out in Vegas sealed the deal, right? And he hadn't signed his two-way before, even though Tshiebwe and Wong had, and there could have been other reasons for that, like maybe they thought they were going to make a deal and have a roster spot or something, who knows? But either way, once he had that good of a summer league, I think the chance that he was on the team this year went from about 95% to like 100%. It's just, and two-way made the most sense the whole time. So I'm pretty sure that's what the thinking was going to be, and that's what it is. Kendall Brown back with the Pacers on a two-way. What does that mean for the Pacers now? Well, Gabe York is definitely on the outside looking in. He was going to be the other subject of this two-way discussion, right? He and Kendall Brown were both on two-ways to end last year. Gabe York was not a restricted free agent, unlike Kendall Brown. He did not have any outstanding qualifying offer because he wasn't on the roster for enough active days last year. Very minor CBA thing, but it matters. So he could not be a restricted free agent, and obviously, he didn't play for the Summer League team, so his long-term outlook with the Pacers doesn't look particularly strong. Even last year, he did play Summer League, even though he wasn't on a two-way or had a deal heading into the season, so there was more signs that he could be back in New York. This year, it's TBD on if he'll be back with the Pacers or not in any capacity, and by that I mean really the Mad Ants, because the Pacers are out of spots. And Gabe York is talented. I enjoy watching him play. I enjoy the things he can do, but he's just outside the NBA ranks, and his scoring is valuable. I think there's something worth exploring there, but he's 30 now, right? If he was 24, 25, a team might be more interested in that, especially on a two-way deal, and New York is still two-way eligible, but at his age, it's a lot harder for a team to invest in that unless they're just desperate for guard depth, and I think he is probably NBA caliber, but like one of the back-end guys of a roster on any team, and those spots just aren't really left out there, so we'll see where this ends up for him. I kind of doubted he'd be back with the Pacers anyway, but now that this is officially sealed, the only way he could be back for camp is on an Exhibit 10 deal, and maybe that's possible. Maybe that is something the Pacers want to explore, giving him a bonus to play in the G League, but there is no roster spot or two-way slot available for Gabe York right now. So if he wants to get back to the Pacers, he'll have to do what he's done the last 2 seasons and completely crush it in the G League to be worthy of earning that two-way promotion, or he could do that somewhere else. Who knows what his future holds, but didn't play Summer League with the Pacers and does not currently at least appear to be in their plans for the coming season. And there we go. I have officially talked about every Pacers free agency things. All 5 players have had updates on them, all outbound and inbound players. We've talked about a lot. We'll still talk more about a lot of that stuff as the offseason progresses here on Locked On Pacers. In fact, I'll do a really big offseason episode next Monday, the last day of July. But I think I've covered all the topics now. All the players still out there who have re-signed, who have signed somewhere else, who have been traded away and in, and everything. Unless you think I missed something. We'll see what happens with Gabe York, but I highly doubt it's with the Pacers. And congrats to Kendall Brown for a well-earned second NBA contract. What else is up with the Pacers roster? And what rumor did we hear earlier this week? And once again, about TJ McConnell. Let's talk about all of that in the second segment here. Before we get to all that, though, I want to really quickly talk to you guys about FanDuel, America's One Sportsbook. Take your swing at betting MLB on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right. Just bet $20. You'll earn $200 in bonus bets. Win or lose, that's $200. You can spend betting everything from the money line to the over-under to who you think is going to be hit the first home run. All on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. When you win, you can get paid instantly. That's a plus. There's no better place to bet on MLB than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get up to $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com/LockedOn. FanDuel, an official partner of Major League Baseball. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day. I want to send out my condolences to LeBron James' family. Bronny, cardiac arrest in the last couple days. Scary stuff. He's out of the ICU in stable condition. That's, of course, great news. Wishing the best for Bronny's health and that the James family can have the privacy and safety that they need at this time. And for more on that, Locked On Lakers can give you the latest on all that. But the great news in general that he's okay. Hopefully that he can continue to play and live a life that he loves, and that LeBron's family is doing well. Let's continue Pacers offseason chatter here as we kind of transition through the rest of this show. Roster updates. Like I said, Gabe York on the outside of things now. Maybe he gets an Exhibit 10, though. That is one of the few things left for the Pacers, and that's a worthy transition that I didn't even mean to do on purpose, since, I did mention that Gabe York in the last segment, but Exhibit 10s, that's all the Pacers have left, right? Because they have 15 guys as right now, as I speak on currently 1:52 a.m. on July 26th, the Pacers have 15 guys with a standard contract and 3 players with two-way contracts. That's the maximum a team can have in the regular season. Let me be clear, in the regular season. Why do I say that? Because in the offseason, they can have 21 players on their team. In theory, the Pacers could sign 3 more guys who are even good players. They'd have to cut them when the season starts, or cut someone when the season starts, but they could do it. So in terms of what their regular season roster could look like, they're full up. They've got 15 guys. All of them have a seat on the bus, even if it may not be the perfect seat. They have their 3 two-way guys. All of them make sense on two-way deals. That all is fine and dandy. They still have room to add Exhibit 10 players. Maybe Gabe York could be one of them. If you don't know, I kind of said it in the first segment. An Exhibit 10 contract is a 1-year, non-guaranteed minimum contract with an NBA team that contains an Exhibit 10 clause, which basically says, hey, if you get cut from the team you're on right now, and then you report to that team's G League affiliate for 60 days, you will get a bonus of a determined amount in the contract. That maximum bonus has grown. I think it's now $75,000 this season and will grow in future seasons. So a decent chunk of change on top of a G League salary. So they're good to get, and it could be up to that amount. We'll see, but that's a good way to get guys into camp and make it all worth it for them. So that's what the Pacers have left. Last year they signed to those really late. Right before camp. Davy Servidis got one pretty early. The rest of the ones they gave out, like David Stockton, Justin Anderson, Norval Pell, for example, those all came September, right before camp actually started. So perhaps a delay could be on those. But Gabe York looking like if he's with the Pacers again, it will be with the Mad Ants. We will see where that ends up. But that's all the free agency stuff. If anything else happens, if any trades happen, of course we'll cover it here, and maybe we'll do a thing on trades next week. We'll see. But as it stands, that's all the free agency stuff. It's all filled up. But there was one more little sneaky rumor that came in this week, and it's sort of one we've already covered here on the Locked On Pacers podcast from Mark Stein, who has been killing it with the Pacers stuff this summer, in a story titled "In the Trade Happy NBA?" Love is not eternal. A lot of stuff about James Harden in there, but he says in his notes section at the bottom, the Suns remain interested in trading for Indiana's TJ McConnell, league sources say. Well, you might be thinking, Tony, you already talked about that, and I did. Thank you for pointing that out to me, person I just made up in my head. But the difference here is this is after the Suns have now traded Cam Payne. That was a big part of this originally, is that Payne was most of the salary required if the Suns were going to make a trade for TJ McConnell in the offseason, right? It would probably have been Cam Payne and Ish Wainwright or something like that. For salary purposes, Cam Payne is now traded. He's on the San Antonio Spurs. The Suns salary dumped him, which saved them a ton of money, but they don't have Cam Payne anymore. So they literally, I guess there are technical ways, but they quite literally can't make a normal trade for TJ McConnell. Just like a standard, yep, here's some stuff for some other stuff, and the blah, 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 it's all over. there's not really anything that can happen here. And Stein puts this in here, and I didn't even realize he typed this out. I put it in my notes. Until the middle of the season, when the Suns can actually trade their minimum salary players, all the ones they signed this summer, which is like half their team, right? Until then, there's no easy path for a McConnell to the Suns trade unless it's some big trade with DeAndre Ayton involved. And then it'd have to be McConnell plus a couple players on the Pacers side for salary matching reasons. So, all that to say, it makes sense that the Suns still have interest in TJ McConnell. As Mark Stein says, he's a good player, fills their biggest need. Their starting point guard, let me be clear, starting point guard is about to be Bradley Beal, right? They don't have point guard depth on their team at all. And so having TJ McConnell come off your bench, that gives you depth at the spot, that gives you a natural guy at the one. He could plug and play with so many members of their team. Like, it makes sense why they have interest. It also makes sense that they just can't do anything about it. They can't make a reasonable trade. Maybe all of their second rounders and some random cobbled together salary in January or February makes sense. But as of now, that means nothing to the Pacers. There is no trade that makes any sense for the Pacers to actually consider at this exact time involving the Phoenix Suns and TJ McConnell, unless there's some crazy three-team nonsense that I have yet to think of. But hey, sounds like TJ McConnell's going to get his wish. And why I say that? Because there's one more sentence in Mark Stein's report about this. He says, word is McConnell, furthermore, is hopeful of staying with the Pacers. Well, hey, that's good news for the Pacers that's the case, right? He did re-sign with the team a couple summers ago, so clearly he likes being in Indiana. He chose the Pacers in free agency before that, so he's chosen the Pacers twice. Clearly he has some desire to be with the team, and he's gotten healthy minutes here. He's gotten to be a veteran here. He is tight with everybody. He's such a good dude. So that makes sense, and that's good for the Pacers that they have that trust and relationship with him. And right now, as it stands, I would think, especially with the Pacers roster full and no George Hill and no James Johnson, he has even more value to the Pacers than he did last year, not only as a decent backup player, but also as that veteran. Now, I did just say something I'm about to contradict immediately. If he's totally out of the rotation, if he is the odd man out in the backcourt, then he has less value to the Pacers than last year because they're paying him more to do less. That is typically not good from a team-building perspective, even though TJ McConnell does have talent and value. It's just how the Pacers have sifted out their roster. But he has 1 year left fully guaranteed, then like a half guaranteed, a little over that year after that. So his contract is close to the end. He's been a great vet for the Pacers, and the Suns have no way of meaningfully getting him if he wants to stay. It seems like he will at least not be going to Phoenix. We'll see where this shakes out. And if there's any more updates on this from anyone else, remember Jake Fisher reported it initially in Yahoo Sports. Well, of course, covered here on Locked On Pacers. If you want more on that, 2 Fridays ago, I believe, I talked about TJ McConnell and the Suns, and then a little before that was the Pascal Siakam episode, which people have been still very interested in since then. Pascal Siakam, obviously, still with the Raptors. We'll see if there's any movement on that front as the days progress. Let's close out today's show with what's going on with Tyrese Haliburton. He's done everything cool this week. A wedding of a former Pacer he was involved in. He's on the cover of Slam, and he just did a Pro-Am with Obi Toppin. I was there. I'll break it all down and why it matters to close out today's show. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Pacers your first listen today and every single day for your second listen, Locked On Warriors, just because I just saw Trayce Jackson-Davis playing tonight against Tyrese Halburton in a game. Speaking of Tyrese Halburton, lots of cool stuff for him in the last couple days. We'll start with, from a notoriety perspective, a cool one. On the cover of Slam Magazine. That's super sick. That is super sick. He gets a cover story to go with it. Cool honor. A big thing in basketball in general. A big culture thing, right? Slam has been a big deal for a while, since the 90s. The late 80s, I believe. Long time around. Haliburton on the cover of issue 245. A great story titled Inside the Rise of Tyrese Halburn and His Mission to Lead the Pacers Back on Track from Daisha Smith. Caitlin Cooper's quoted in there. It's really good, and I do have a favorite anecdote from it. But cool to see Haliburton be the cover athlete. 4th Pacer to get a solo cover. Very rare thing for someone in this market. Reggie Miller was on one of the versions of issue 33. Michael Jordan was on the other one. Jermaine O'Neal was on one version of issue 76. I don't remember who was on the other one there. And then Paul George was the solo cover athlete for issue 174, and now the Pacers. So about every 70 episodes or so, I keep saying episodes, about every 70 issues or so, the Pacers sneak somebody in there. So the 300-ish, perhaps somebody else from Pacerland could sneak their way on to the Slam cover. Very cool for Tyrese Halburn. Cool honor, cool story, and obviously more proof of his ascent both as a player and in popularity. And the story's really good. Interesting stuff about his NBA rise with good quotes from friend of the pod, Caitlin Cooper, who was on last week talking Summer League. And my favorite anecdote that I mentioned I wanted to bring up was actually about his trainer, Drew Hanlon, in here. They linked up officially early in 2022, just before Haliburton was actually traded to the Pacers, ironically enough. And Hanlon was interviewed for this story, and it talks about how they met up for dinner in Philly, and Hanlon was pressing Tyrese Haliburton about being a potential client. What do you want to achieve in the NBA? He said, how many times are you going to be an all-star? How many times do you make first-team All-NBA? And then Hanlon is quoted as saying, I'm just giving Haliburton a bunch of these gut-punching questions. Then I said, you know what? The biggest thing is you're not going to be able to do all this stuff if you keep attempting like 11 shots a game. I was like, it's just not possible. The math ain't mathing, which is true. Haliburton has talked about his low shot attempts sometimes being problematic for his team, even though he's passed first. Like, it's a very hard balance in his head, and I actually want to dive into that a little more as a story this year on how he thinks about that, how he tries to manage that, because it's very interesting to me. But either way, he was a passing guy at the time. Leading up to this conversation in this game, Haliburton, not a high shot attempts guy per game. At that moment of that season, he was taking 11.1 shots per game. That's fine. That's probably not the number that he would need to be his absolute best. So Hanlon continues, and he said, you were number 14 in high school, so that's the number. If you want to work with me this summer, you're going to have to shoot 14 field goal attempts tomorrow night against the Sixers. Otherwise, I'm not working with you. So what does Tyrese Halburn do on January 9th, 2022 in Philly against the Sixers? 38 points, 7 assists, and 3 steals. The highest scoring game of his career at the time. Took that advice to heart. 19 shot attempts. He was 5 for 9 from 3. And the big part here, and something that's actually a big part of his next steps to me, 12 free throw attempts. He went 11 of 12 from the line. If he can get to the line more in general, he'll be a better player. But I think that that's really cool that he took that challenge in stride, attempted the shots, and had a career game by a mile. In fact, one of only 2 games reaching 30 points that season, the other one coming with the Pacers in Boston. If you remember that one on April Fool's Day of that season, he never cracked even close to 38 as a rookie. He didn't even hit 30 in his first year. So that was his best game at the time by a mile, which was cool to hear the background of kind of what that came together. And hey, Haliburton now working with Hanlon and playing fantastic. There's much more in that story that I advise you to actually read. It's very good and obviously cool that he is on the cover of said magazine. If you want to buy one, there are collector's items. They're very cool. Go check them out with Slam. That's not the only thing Hallie did in the recent days, or was a part of in Pacerland, that was interesting. Earlier today, I wrote in my notes, it was actually yesterday, last night, because of what the time of day it is, he played in Dizzy Runs. Dizzy Runs, if you don't know, is run by Kyle Guy, former NBA player who started a Pro-Am. And the Dizzy name comes from Dizzy, from the Harlem Globetrotters, Dizzy Grant, who helped start this in conjunction with Kyle Guy. I believe that's how it was told to me. I haven't looked into it in total, but that is what I was told, and he was, in fact, there. Either way, Haliburton played in Kyle Guy's Pro-Am. So Pro-Ams have to be sanctioned by the NBA, I believe, for NBA players to play in them, but Kyle Guy used to be in the NBA. It was a little easier for him to kind of run through that process with the Players Association, get it approved. This started last year, and NBA guys play in it all the time. Lance Stevenson has put in it before, and various other ones have before. This particular night, Haliburton played. So did Obi Toppin. So 2 direct Pacers. Benedict Mathurin was scheduled to play last week. He did not end up playing. But Haliburton and Obi Toppin did show up, and joining them from the NBA ranks, Jeff Teague played in the game. Trace Jackson-Davis played in the game. I think those were the only 4 NBA guys. Joey Brunk, if many of you are Butler or IU fans, he was playing in that game, which was pretty cool. I definitely feel like I'm forgetting one of the NBA dudes who was on Tyrese Jackson Davis's team. Doesn't matter, though. It does matter. Keelan Martin played. He was not in that game. He was in a different game that night. So lots of talent, like good players all over the place in this game, including Haliburton Toppin. That said, it was still very much an exhibition. Not a lot of defense, a lot of attempts at highlights, but it was cool in general because it was free. Oh, Kyle Guy's the other NBA player missing. Doy, the one who started the event. And Kyle Guy, by the way, part of the reason this was possible beyond Haliburton being local and playing in Indy is Kyle Guy played for the Kings at the same time Haliburton did during the 2020-21 season. That's just Haliburton's rookie year before Kyle Guy left to join the Miami Heat the following season. So Kyle Guy set that all up, got it all linked up. That was all the NBA guys. So 6 of them in that game. Low effort in general, but very cool because it was free. It was a free event, right, to anyone who showed up and could get in the doors. So some guys can't see Haliburton as much or Obi Toppin that much, and they were really just trying to cook and get highlights. A lot of one-on-one play, not a lot of set actions and stuff like that, which was pretty cool. If you want to see them, I tweeted like 5 of them over on my Twitter account. I was too far away from the opposite basket for them to look good on YouTube if you're watching there, so they are not here, but they are on my Twitter feed, and maybe I should have put them together, but I didn't. And then they talked after the game. Toppin and Haliburton did media, which was very kind of them to do at an event that they basically volunteered to play at. Thank you. Kyle Guy also did media. It was very lucky. I was extremely lucky how this all came together, but they've been working out a little bit this week. Obi Toppin and Tyrese Halburn have for among the first time as teammates. Obviously, Obi Toppin's been a Pacer for officially something like 19 days. So among the first times they've worked out together and played together, which was pretty cool. Haliburton snuck it in this trip, right? He was, if you listened last week, I talked about this. He was in Corey Joseph's wedding, and he was at Corey Joseph's wedding this past weekend out in LA. Corey Joseph, former Pacer. He was also on the team with both Kyle Guy and Tyrese Halburn in Sacramento. Haliburton considers him one of his vets. He was at that wedding this weekend. Then he flew to Indy to get a little work in and go to this Pro-Am, and then he'll immediately fly back out to the coast and get ready for work with Team USA, which I talked about that on yesterday's show if you want to know more on that. But those practices start like early August, late this week, honestly, because they have some scrimmages coming up pretty soon. So Haliburton fitting it in, but getting some time in with Obi, which is great. Obi also is, of course, in Indy getting some work in himself. He talked about working with some of the other Pacers players out in Vegas during the time of Summer League. He brought up like Jordan Nwora, Aaron Nesmith. I can't remember all of them, but he's already gotten some time in with some of his other teammates, and he thinks he pairs well with Haliburton. Can you believe that? Most players do, but specifically Obi Toppin also will. He's perfect for these Pro-Am games that are free and have a lot of fans who want to ooh and ah because he can just dunk from anywhere and do crazy things with the ball. He's so athletic, it's ridiculous. But also, this game's had no defense. That was just outside of a few stretches of really intense guarding since Elam ending. It was a very low-stakes basketball game, which is fine. I mean, there was a lot of ISO play, one-on-one kind of stuff. Tyrese Jackson Davis was really good. He was one of the best players on the floor in that game. Teague looked good, too. I mean, everybody was really cooking who has the talent to do so. It's just fun to be there. I hope that I get a chance to go back to that at some point. They only have 2 more sessions this summer. You can follow Dizzy Pro-Am on Twitter. I don't remember their handle, but check them out if you want to know more about this. They play in Noblesville. They played at the D1 Factory, but cool to see Halburn. Cool to talk to him and Obi Toppin at the same time and see him try to do an off-the-backboard dunk where he passed it to himself. Did not go very well. Obi Toppin did do many things like that. They both pair well. They're both going to look good together, but it was fun to talk to them and hear about their first practices together in such a setting. And I'll have a story on that in the coming days on Pacers SI. So we've made it through every free agency topic that has happened or could happen so far, except for one. So tomorrow, especially now that the Pacers team is fully set with their 2-ace-2, we'll look at the rotation, what the Pacers rotation could look like this coming season. Eddie Garrison from the Pacers Radio Network and 1075 The Fan is going to join us to do all that. Friday, I really want to talk about Bennedict Mathurin, and I'll explain why on the episode. But I have opinions on Bennedict Mathurin that were debated on the internet recently, and I think it'll be fun to dive into that. Then next Monday, the final day of July, we'll talk about the moves the Pacers can still make this offseason before the season actually starts. There's always quite a few. A lot of them sneak through the cracks, and people don't know about them, and many of them end up happening, or some of them end up happening. So we'll get to that next Monday. And then in August, we transition. New content Want to do a book club this year. We'll do some historical stuff, some what ifs, and if you're lucky, a few player interviews if I can actually land them. I usually don't try to do too many of those during the season. There's just too much topical stuff going on, and even during free agency and the draft and stuff. But in August, if I can, I'll see if I can get any of the guys that I have a relationship with to come chat with me for a few minutes on Locked On Pacers. We'll see how that goes. Anywho, thank you all for listening today. Hope you learned something or found something interesting. We'll be back tomorrow talking rotation with Eddie Garrison. Should be super fun. I'm looking forward to it. Hope you are too. Everybody have a fantastic rest of your day. I'll see you soon.